Are you teaching a critical thinking skills class or a verbal comprehension class? No. So that should not be the thing that is affecting how they answer that question. And that's the thing that we run into all the time.
Hello and welcome to the It Depends podcast, your alternative guide to the often mystifying world of psychometrics. In each episode, your hosts, myself, Tim Burnett, and the brilliant Dr. Amanda Danis will serve you a cocktail of psychometric wisdom garnished with a twist of sarcasm and humour. Our mission, to help you actually enjoy the process of building better tests. So grab your favourite beverage and get ready to dive into the awesome world of psychometrics. Amanda, welcome. Welcome to It Depends. Welcome, listeners. Here for another roller coaster of an episode. And this time we're going to be talking about item types. How you doing, Amanda? How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good.
I like that you already said roller coaster because I've already thought a little bit about this topic this morning, and I'm just going to go back and forth and probably say some things that people are going to want to, email me about. So we'll see how it goes.
Are you going to be contentious?
I might be.
That's good.
As
Okay.
contentious as a psychometrician can get, possibly. We'll see. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Well, so we're talking about item types, and I think I always my kind of go-to one, and I think about different types of item types that are out there, is the multiple choice one. So my first question to you, Amanda, today is multiple choice the best question type for a test?
Well, it depends, and I'm
showing
you my T-shirt. It depends. There we go. Really early on in the episode. And again, like a lot of the other topics that we've talked about, it depends on what the content is, what your resources are for building the test, how you're going to score the test, what type of protests or appeals you might expect to do or to get. How many SMEs do you have to create? There's all sorts of things that go into what type of item types are best. And, I think most psychometricians would agree that at the end of the day, if you could do a performance-based test, a practical exam for every job, that would be ideal, right? That would remove some measurement error. You would actually get to see the person doing the job, but that's just really, really impossible in a lot of arenas for different reasons. And practical exams, performance-based tests are my favorite tests to work on. I'm sure we'll talk about them later. But multiple choice items, I think, get a bad rap these days. So I am still a fan of a good multiple choice test question. And I think that they are more difficult to write than anybody thinks to make a good one. And I think that they can be done very, very well, but they can also be done very, very badly. So there's a lot that goes into them, both in discussing them and developing them. So yeah, it depends. There's nothing wrong with doing a multiple choice test, but if you've got the resources to do something fancier and more accurately measuring the skills and knowledge, then I vote to do it.
Do you think
that makes sense? I didn't really answer the question. I mean, it's just kind of.
No, I suppose no, it's fine. So it's kind of so what you're saying is there's a lot of factors you need to consider as to whether or not you're going to use a multiple choice question type or any other question type. Really, when you're starting out, when you're starting looking at a test, do you always immediately have in your head this is going to be a multiple choice test, or at what point do you ask yourself what kind of question types you're going to use in this test?
I think that's a good question. I think it is sort of the default, right? It is the most common by far. It is probably the most commonly known for SMEs to write a test question like that. If you start talking about hotspots and drag and drop and these other kind of more technology enhanced items, there's also a learning curve to get your SMEs on board or your item writers on board to write that. So I think first off the bat, normally when I ask somebody, what is your test? I'm surprised if they don't say it's multiple choice. And lots of times it does raise actual red flags for me if I get a new client that's not doing a multiple choice test. Because if they're doing an essay or a rubric-based test or portfolio-based test, I'm immediately on guard as to okay, here comes 5,000 questions as to how did you develop it? How do you score it? How do you validate it? There's 5,000 things that have to go into that type of item type, whereas a multiple choice can be fairly more straightforward. So I do think it is sort of the default. I think in new programs starting out, especially if they don't have a ton of money, you're just going to start with a multiple choice, and there's nothing wrong with that. We have a few clients who are doing performance-based tests, either in simulators or in like mock-up, systems for drywall or whatever it is, and it's really, really cool. And the budget is extensive for those. So yes, I think multiple choice is the default. But it's way better than doing true false or fill in the blank, which I hate.
Why have you go against fill in the blank? Go on. And true false.
Fill in the blank, I think, is a lazy way of writing a bad multiple choice question. Really? It is harder to grade. I can turn pretty much any fill in the blank question to a multiple choice question. You just have to come up with better distractors usually, or actually write out your response options properly. And we don't really allow fill in the blank for our clients unless they are, I don't think we have anybody that uses it, nor true false. I think that it's, not my thing.
True false. No, that's fine. True false is one that I would kind of imagine. Yeah, okay, fine. That's quiz territory, isn't it? It's kind of, maybe okay for quite a quick formative solution or something like that, just to kind of quickly gauge within the classroom. And it's, I suppose, in a way, it kind of stems from people in the classroom putting their hands up when kind of who would agree with this, voting, isn't it? Really, in a way. But fill in the blank, it's interesting you said that. But what other question types are there out there that you think are kind of quite common these days? And let's kind of expand that a little bit. So
before I say I hate, I need to caveat I hate fill in the blank. If you have a small sample size and you're going to hand grade your test, fill in the blank, fine. If you have somebody to pay to do that, but if somebody is like, our test is to fill in the blank, and I say that's silly to pay somebody time to go in and grade it. And then what if it's sort of the right answer, but it's not really the right answer? When you do an open construct answer, you're opening a can of worms with, what if they spell it incorrectly? Are you still going to accept it? If it's computer-based test and you're doing fill in the blank, if they type it incorrectly, if they have spelling issues, are you measuring their spelling issues or not? Write a better multiple choice question, and you kind of remove. So for me, the fill in the blank is crappy from a psychometric, like scoring logistical standpoint, right? And I think it's lazy.
You mentioned open construct. Can you just for anyone who doesn't know what that means?
Open construct just means you are just, or constructed response, open response, constructed response, open construct. You're just writing, it's either an essay or the test taker is creating the answer. They're not selecting an answer.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Okay. No, that's fine. That's fine. That's what, and it can,
yeah.
So we've upset the fill in the blank squad there. We're going to get bricks through our windows through that. But you're right. It's going to be certain other times. What other question types is a bit of kind of more of a go-to for you then? So if not multiple choice, what would be your next kind of option in your question item type arsenal?
Some sort of practical tests item, even if it's still. So people will call. This is another fighting phrase, but people will call non-multiple choice items. They'll say it's not a multiple choice, it's a drag and drop, or it's a matching, but they're all those are all sort of essentially still multiple choice. Yeah. And the same thing if you use audio or video or diagrams or schematics and images. A lot of it could be broken down into multiple choice, even if it's a series of multiple choice items that lead up to the final answer. So we do a lot of incorporating of video, audio, images, especially in a lot of our technical exams for certification exams. Diagrams, blueprints, all that kind of stuff. They're still essentially multiple choice because at the end of the day, if you're testing thousands of people, that's the best way to be able to do it. in an efficient and a good way, as long as the items are written well. They're sort of hard to write. But I do think that there are, there's newer ones, like there's drag and drop, and there's, hotspots, and there's, data entry ones. And so like data entry into a spreadsheet, that's still sort of right, wrong. It's still sort of binary, but you are still sort of doing a practical exam because you're measuring how well they're doing that skill of doing data entry. So there's lots of cool stuff in CBT that you can do that's borderline practice performance exam and not really multiple choice. So I just like to get creative. We have one group that's doing a portfolio assessment, and they're new, and they came in and they were very proud of their portfolio assessment. And I felt really bad because we just kind of ripped it apart and said, you would be better off doing a multiple choice exam at this point, because what you're doing is inconsistent across candidates. And that's, to me, is more important. It's really important, is fairness. So we do a lot of different types of items, but I would say at the end of the day, most of the items are multiple choice or some format of multiple choice. Does that make, I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. So I'll tell you a quick funny story in a second, but yeah, a lot of the platforms out there that provide assessment delivery platforms, they kind of this. We've got 50 question types, and they are just...
I want them to all get together, and I want them to make me a beautiful pie chart of the proportion of items in their banking system that are multiple choice versus everything else. And I've had one vendor partner do that, and it came out exactly as you would expect, which is fine. And there's nothing wrong with that. And can you use cool items? Yes. But sometimes I also have to talk the client out of using I'm like, why do you want to do that type of item? Well, we have the technology, so we should do it. I'm like, but why? You're measuring something that has nothing to do with that type of item. Like, why would you? Your people don't see that on a daily basis in the job. So why are you trying to use that just to like be cool? It introduces, I would say, some measurement error in there, because if I get to an item type that I've never seen before and I'm like, what is this? I mean, I'm old, so I'm like, I don't know what these buttons are. So you've got that learning curve there. So you just have to, you can make a good argument to use some of those cool items, but lots of times I'm just going to shoot it down. So
no, again, we make a very good point.
Fighting words.
From that usability point, though, you an excellent point, because I've seen a million different, well, not a million, but I've seen a lot of variations of people's implementation of things like graph types and stuff like that as to how you kind of manipulate it. And sometimes people get a bit kind of concerned about the scaffolding that's then put in place to try and help people use those items, and if that's then helping them do that. With things like spreadsheet item types, they're great when they replicate Word. I remember working on one particular project where we were told not to try and replicate Word, even though Word was the vastly kind of used platform. It was because it was too word specific, and we were being a bit unfair to the other platforms and systems that are out there. So
it shouldn't be. Yeah.
I know I should have had you on my team at the time and stuff. But when you said about the hotspots and stuff, there was a great little memory I have from. It's not my meeting, but when someone came out from the meeting and said straight away, they were on a call to. So this is from a British organisation demonstrating their platform to an American organisation for the first time, and they showed this. I don't know what it was, like a hotspot, a graphing question type. And the response from the American client that was on the thing was, "Wow, that's the Las Vegas of item types." That it was just, we loved it as Brits. We're kind of, that's so funny. That's because I think.
But was that
one thing I've always
mean it as an insult or as a compliment?
No, they were like, wow. Yeah, I can't do that
because I don't like Vegas, so that's not my cup of tea. But
well, but I think it was just that kind of, wow, that's such a fancy, funky item type. Maybe they were taking the mick. I don't know.
I think that if I say that to you, that's not a compliment. Yeah.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah.
I think
I
think it was
obnoxious. It's obnoxious and distracting, is what I mean about it. It's like a Las Vegas item. There's too many colors, and it's sensory overload, and I can't do it. So
Yeah.
Did they end up? But did they end up using that item type?
I think they did. Yeah, I think they. Well, they like with most. I think it was kind of like a sprinkling of the item, and I think this is one of the questions because when about blending item types and stuff in there. The one stat I remember from a client that I worked with in the past was of their millions of item bank that they had millions of items. We're migrating them from one system to another system, and I think we did account there was some like 98% of the item types were multiple choice within that migration. And the rest were they had some functional skills, which is a UK based qualification, so which is quite hard and tough. Have you ever looked at the functional skills tests? Have you ever heard of those at all?
Think so. Is it like general IQ type stuff or applied?
It's like it's for level 2 and 3 students, so kind of non-GCSE level school leaving students who are taking a slightly more vocational route into education. So if you leave school to go to college and university in the UK, so at 16 you take national tests, then you take the GCSEs. If you fail your GCSEs or you don't do very well at GCSEs English and maths, then you would take the functional skills one. It'd be quite a good episode for us to do that, actually, just to look at that test as a whole.
And that would be interesting too, because we don't have that in the States. I mean, we could get into a whole standardized testing thing, but we have the SATs, but we don't have like a functional skills or like something that lets you know what you should do if you're not going to college. I mean, there's career development tests and there's career inventory things, and I've taken several of them, and they always tell me I should be a forest ranger, so I'm not really sure what that means.
Yeah.
But
it's not a diagnostic style test. It's
okay. I would be interested in learning about it.
Yes, it's good to want to look at. But one thing I've always noticed over time is that in Europe, there is a lot more use of different item types. I'm not saying that people still new programs that come on board probably will choose multiple choice as the starting point. But I've always kind of observed that there is a lot more use of different item types in Europe than I have seen when I've worked on tests in America. So there's a different.
And aren't there a lot?
Culture there?
Aren't there a lot less psychometricians in Europe than there are in America?
There are a lot less psychometricians. If there's anyone out there, there's a psychometrician that wants to move to Europe, you've just talk to me, because I know of quite a few people are looking for psychometricians.
Is that a correlation? Does that mean causation issue, or is that like that people are just like using all these fancy items without really much thinking about the measurement impact of them?
Well, possibly,
because they don't have a psychometrician to say, why are you using a hotspot? Nobody, like, what does that lend to the measurement of your test?
Well,
does it make it more efficient? Sorry.
I think this is This has always been one of the kind of differences in when we talked about this at the EATP conference in London and things like that, where the different emphasis that people put on psychometricians in different spaces. Yes, in Europe, a psychometrician will be present, but wouldn't necessarily be leading the process.
Mm-hmm.
That's quite a sweeping statement. Whereas we've always talked about with yourself, a psychometrician in the US or North America is kind of always leading that process a little bit more, aren't they? But that's a whole topic in itself, isn't it?
That is a whole topic, because it depends on the psychometrician as well.
And
I'm just bossy. So.
So one thing I wanted to ask you, what do you see as being the difference between performance test items and technology enhanced items? What's your kind of view there? Do you think
do you mean like
labeling?
So performance based tests is, to me, and sometimes I wish we were like a radio show and we could accept callers live, because I would be like, I'd call out my colleagues and be like, dial in. I know you have an opinion on this. I think, to me, a performance-based test is basically one where somebody is demonstrating the skill that you are trying to measure. Flat. That's just it. There's multiple ways to do that, whether that's in a simulator, whether that's on a computer, whether that's on the job testing. That's the performance-based test. You are performing or demonstrating the skill. technology enhanced item to me can help with performance based items. It can also just mean you're providing audio, you're giving a video, you're making an adaptive kind of testlet of items where if I answer it this way, I go down this path of items. If I answer it this way, I go down this path of items. So there's lots of things that technology does that actually doesn't have anything to do with actually performing the skill. And so there's lots of ways that I think that technology enhanced items testing process more efficient. But as I've been saying all along, I think it can also hinder it can add unnecessary bias or unnecessary floof, for lack of a better, more technical term, unnecessary floof to the test that people will do just because it looks pretty or it sounds cool. And maybe that's worth it, right? If you're launching a new certification exam and you have a competitor and that competitor is doing all these cool items and people just think that it's really cool, you got to keep up with the Joneses and you might have to do that as well. But from a measurement perspective, I'm always going to be that like the devil's advocate who says, I need you to just explain to me why this item type helps me measure this person better. And it might be that it's more efficient. It might be that it's cheaper to create. That's absolutely true. But I just want to make sure that it's not hindering how I measure that person. And the performance-based test is ideal. I mean, if we could make that, it makes me so happy. I love working with clients who are doing performance-based tests. Super cool.
Give me an example. Can you?
Yeah. So I think I can talk in general terms without being arrested for non-disclosure violation. But one of our clients is the Board of Pilotage Commissioners in Seattle, Washington. So the Mariner pilots are the men and women, there's one woman in the entire state of Washington, who basically they will go out on a pilot boat and they'll meet the huge tankers, the ships that are bringing cars and cargoes. I mean, the ginormous, and they will pilot them and drive them, be the captain, they'll take over the controls and they will drive them into the Puget Sound and park them basically. And the reason is that they do that is because these captains of the cargo ships are coming from all over the world. They don't know Puget Sound. They don't know the ins and outs. They don't know where the silt is that day. They don't know the currents, all of this stuff. And so it's for the environment, it's protecting the environment, it's protecting the structure of the Puget Sound harbor, all of this stuff. And they're highly trained, and it is like the pinnacle of the mariner occupation career. And it's a huge testing process. It's every 4 years, they take a written exam. If they pass the written exam, then they get in a simulator and they do a simulator exercise. So what I've been able to do for the last 6 months is work with a bunch of the pilots in Washington State to design the exercise that's going to occur in the simulator exam. And it's really, really cool. Really cool. Like I can walk into the simulator and I get motion sickness within 10 seconds. Yeah, even though I'm standing, I'm in a room. I know that I'm standing in a room, but it is everywhere, and you're on the bridge of a ship, and I will vomit if I don't leave shortly. So I don't go in the actual simulator very often when they're running it. I sit in the control room. But it is amazing because how else can you perfectly measure ship handling besides putting them on the ship and risking $1 bajillion worth of damage? So this is really cool. We also have the Glazers. They've got some mock-up of glass, install systems that ship around the country at different training centers, and they test guys and they run through, and it's an 8-hour training session. And they get graded on this extensive rubric. The examiners are trained and calibrated every year. I mean, it's a lot, but it is the psychometrician's dream is to be able to design that, because then you're talking about scoring, multi-dimensional items, weighted items. It's just really fun. So I could talk about that forever. Sorry.
No, it's good. No, it's interesting. And interesting point you mentioned there about, because we talk about the kind of comparison between performance test and technology enhanced items. So a performance test is the process, and that could include technology. It couldn't. It could just be purely an observation based exercise. Whereas when we talk about technology enhanced items, they are items themselves that are leveraging technology to go beyond what you might have ever been able to do if you're doing on paper or something like that. It's taken a whole spin on it. And I suppose the simulation, you talk about simulations, so flight sims and those kind of things. Yeah, that's still a performance-based exercise that's been enhanced through technology, because it could be, like you say, it could be them piloting a boat to do that. I suppose when you're looking at things like multiple choice and stuff like that, and you mentioned there about doing an essay at the start before you did that simulation. Do you think sometimes that things like essay response question types, those kind of things, do they measure deeper learning as part of the process, or can multiple choice do as good a job?
I need more coffee for that question. It depends. It depends on what content are you asking them about, right? Are you asking them to interpret a reading passage and express their own feelings using imagery? I mean, what's your prompt, right? Are you asking just a simple question and they can just write an essay to answer it? Or are you asking something really complex and for them to really dig down deep and synthesize information, turn it back into metaphors and similes and all those things and imagery? I mean, is it an English literature essay, or are you asking them to write about their experience on the job and how that will help them in the future? That can't be answered with a multiple choice test question because it's specific to the person. So one thing about essay questions is how unique is the answer supposed to be? Like the universe that the answer is coming from, is that universe unique to that person, or is it general knowledge? So that's one thing. The other thing that comes into essay questions is, if I had to pick an answer, I would say, yes, essay questions can get at deeper knowledge because they might require all of that synthesis that a multiple choice question might not. But a really, really good multiple choice question can get at a lot of things that people don't usually assume that it can. So if I write a complex reading passage, and then I write some questions that make the person think and make connections from the reading passage to get to these solutions, that at first you look at the response options and you're like, none of those really fit, until you go back and you think about it and you think about imagery, and then you put, it's really difficult to write, and it's much easier to write an essay question that says, using imagery, describe blah, 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 blah. But it's also a lot harder to grade, because I'm always going to say, what is the rubric? Did you train your examiners? If you're using an automatic essay scoring system, like some of our big vendor colleague friends have, that they've spent a bajillion dollars, very technical term, bajillion, to develop, for those large, some of the standardized testing to do essay scoring. And they've had some great success with it. But lots of people can't either afford that, to run it through that, or to develop the algorithms to grade them properly. So I think that there's benefits to both. And again, it's that content. What are you really getting at? What are you asking about? And is it unique to that person, or is it general knowledge? If it's general knowledge, I'm guessing that we could probably write some really cool multiple choice items. But if you have a small sample size and you have people trained and ready to grade them, and you're ready to defend your process in a court of law, if you're dealing with employment or certification, then by all means, go for it. Makes my job easier on the front end. Writing the questions is a lot easier.
Exactly, because the way I kind of see it is that to do, like you've said a few times, to write a really good quality multiple choice question, there's a lot of effort that needs to go in at the start. It takes more effort than it would do to write a kind of quite easy essay response question type, and then just the problems then come in the marking, aren't they? And the subjective nature of that, and the making sure everything's level. And that's going to be the same with performance test items and things like that aren't using technology to try and make sure there's a degree of fairness in there. If you're just down on, because you can imagine in a performance testing situation, someone walks in and for whatever reason they just put the backup of the grader straight away. There's a potential there, isn't there? That they're not going to do well because, I don't know, maybe they're just reversed into the car in the car park.
Well, and depending on the industry, they might know them, and so that becomes really difficult as well, is how to grade blindly, and to have some checks and balances. So you can never have just one grader. There's all sorts of things too with the performance-based tests. And part of my job coming in as a psychometrician is to be that kind of like that devil's advocate and say, okay, but you used to work with him years ago, and now he's applying to be, you know, a new blazer or lean building. I mean, we're doing a bunch of them, but you know, how are you going to remove your bias? And I don't mean it with any disrespect to anyone, but we're all human, and it's really hard to do. So that my job is to come in and to make it as bias free as possible, which isn't always, it's never going to be 100% on anything.
So as we kind of come towards the close of this today, I'd like to, we've unpicked a few areas, and I think we've unpicked and discovered a few areas that I'd like to go into a bit more depth, like the multiple choice. You know, what does a good multiple choice question look like? Because I've got students trying to take some exams at the moment, and it seems to me that the way in which they've made the questions difficult is to really mess with your mind a little bit with the way they ask the question.
Are you teaching a critical thinking skills class or a verbal comprehension class? No. So that should not be the thing that is affecting how they answer that question. And that's the thing that we run into all the time, because we get people who double negatives or, you know, which of the following is not, and you're just like, come on, like, are you just trying to trick them? Like, that doesn't make it necessarily, it makes it difficult, but not in the right way. You're measuring something that is not the goal of the test.
I'm going to send you the specimen paper, because these students are really struggling with this, because they're vocational students, they're apprenticeships. And you know, they're not academic students who are going to, you know, kind of read through the lines. They just look at this and it's like a jumble of words to them. It's like some kind of, and that's like, you know, they're really kind of those teasers you get in a cracker or something. Yeah,
it's really unfortunate. And I think all of us can think of those tests that we took in school that were just terribly written. And you go into a test and you know that you know the material. You feel good about it. You know the stuff you've studied. You feel really comfortable, and you get it, and you bomb the test because the test is just total. Can we cuss on this podcast? It's total. It's total crap, and that's really unfortunate. You know, for kids who are in school. You know, I coach high school sport, and I've got teenagers come in all the time, and they talk about a test that they thought they were going to do really good on, and they're upset because they failed, and so imagine people doing that in certification licensure. So they've studied all year, their job depends on it, or their promotion depends on it, or getting a job depends on it. And they go in there and the test is crap. I mean, that just is terrible. That's just, it really like makes me angry. So you can tell.
Yeah, no, it does for me. I'm trying to help guide these students through his test, and it's just, and well, I won't go into it too much, but there's even one part of the syllabus which is actually wrong. So I'm having to teach them the wrong stuff so they can pass this test, which is a kind of step within it. Yeah, it's horrendous. So anyway,
teaching we have in the state of Virginia, we have the SOLs, and I won't say what teachers say that the SOL stands for, but it's the same type of thing where teachers feel like they're teaching to the test just to get their kids to pass, but it's actually not the greatest information. So I'm not against standardized testing. I think it's necessary for a lot of things, but it's not always done well. So, and I don't know enough about SOLs to know, but yeah. So that stinks. So, yeah, I would love to talk about it or read about it with you.
We'll unpick that one, because it's going to be taken off the syllabus soon, so we can pull it apart after it's been removed.
It's perfect.
So what I want to leave the listeners with, if we can, is kind of 3 things to consider when they're looking at the item types. What would you say the kind of 3 top points that they should think about when thinking about the item types they're going to use within their test? Could you give us a summary there?
I can give you 3 things, but they're not necessarily in a ranked order. I think they're all fairly equal.
That's fine.
One is the content of the job. You know, is it a desk job? What are those skills, and what are they best? How are they best measured? And to kind of look at that dream, like ideal. What is that ideal? And then work your way backwards from there. And because resources, not only resources to build it on the front end, but to maintain it. So let's say you've got a bunch of budgetary money right now. You know, everybody's excited to build this new test. That's fantastic. What about in 1 or 2 years when you have to refresh the item bank and you need more items and you need to do extra things? What's it going to look like then? Because you don't want to be changing up your format of your test over and over again. So content, resources, and probably scoring. I would say scoring. You know, how are you going to score those items? That has to be maintained as well. If you have a good group right now that's ready to volunteer, or you're ready to pay them to be your scorers and your examiners on your performance-based test or portfolio or whatever, that's great. What are you going to do next year? What are you going to do the year after that? It just has to be.
As it scales as well.
Right. Is it scalable and sustainable? So
yeah,
I guess that builds into the third/fourth one, because scoring kind of fits in there, because people just kind of forget about that. They're like, they get excited about the measurement part, which is cool, right? Like, I'm glad that, you know, they've read some stuff or they've listened to me and they're like construct validity. They're all about that, but it has to be able to be maintained. And so I think that's why a lot of people end up with a multiple choice item. But again, they can be very, very, very good.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I don't give up on them.
Don't give up on it. Yeah.
Don't give up on
Everyone.
them.
Yeah. Don't keep them in your heart. Really. They have a special place, don't they?
Use audio clips or video clips or images in your response options or in your STEM. I mean, that makes a world of difference, not just text-based. And that's fairly easy to do these days. So fancy multiple choice items, scenario-based, technology enhanced, sure.
Las Vegas style multiple choice. That's what
I'm not too much Las Vegas. If it's Las Vegas, I am shutting my eyes and plugging my ears in. I've only been there once, and it was just a lot for me.
I quite enjoyed it. Anyway, we'll talk about our holiday trips another time. But thank you. That was excellent. I think we we covered quite a lot there. I think we covered giving some people some great tips to take away on there. As ever, listeners, please hit the subscribe button if you want to hear more from myself and Amanda as we unpick more aspects of psychometrics. Then please do that. There's also a link within the show notes to the page where you can ask questions and you can pose questions to us, and we'd love to hear your questions, and we'll name check you as part of that.
Or complaints. Or complaints about my
absolutely. Absolutely.
I would love to hear it. Absolutely.
Yeah, please do send that through. And thank you, Amanda, once again. It's been excellent, and we'll catch you all another day.
Yeah, thanks, Tim.
Take care and goodbye.
Have a good one. Bye.
See you later. Bye.